any technical difficulties since it is a big group today. So without further ado, I'm just going to get into our topic of discussion for today, which is resumes. As we all know, resumes are important not only for students applying to higher education programs or for students applying to things like internships and part-time jobs, but ultimately the resume is a document that an individual uses with them for really the rest of their life as they advance in their career professionally. And so I really enjoy doing these seminars, and I really do enjoy working individually with students on their resume to make sure that that document is in a place where the student can individually work on their resume again for the rest of their life. So at Kweller, we really try to meet with students and go over resume best practices, as well as assist students in the actual process of creating their resume. So for today, what I have is just a short presentation on really the bread and butter of what a resume should have. And I'll also be kind of walking through my own resume to provide a example with details that can really allow everyone to take away what the resume should look like, both in terms of content, but also in terms of just overall style. So I'm going to share my screen so that we can just quickly get into this presentation. Again, please use the chat feature if you have any specific questions. Okay, so as we know, today we're going to be talking about resumes. That's not anything new. All right, so as I mentioned, really the goal of the resume is to convey an idea of what you've accomplished so far. I think that is, really obvious. Individuals know that the resume should include major experiences, major awards, things like that. But I think I've started to think of the resume as more so of a document that can really convey who you are and where your interests lie. And the reason that I say that is because structuring your resume in a specific way can really allow you to highlight certain key aspects of your application or strengths of your application in a different way than others. For example, as someone who has gone through college and is now in medical school, a lot of my experiences have revolved around the sciences, obviously. So that includes research, that includes other opportunities, other scientific opportunities. At the same time, though, I also do have a lot of experience in opportunities for mentorship. So whether that's teaching or tutoring or other things like that, depending on the type of job that I'm applying for, or the type of experience that I'm applying for, it may be important for me to restructure and reformat and represent my resume to convey who I am to a different type of person. So ultimately, what I'm trying to say through this slide is it's important to think about really what you're trying to convey to the party that you're sending your resume to. I think for applications to school, this may be something that does not need so much nuance. I think for definitely when I was applying to college, I sent the same resume to all the institutions. I didn't personalize or customize a resume per institution, but I do think this is something that individuals should be thinking about, is how may I want to shift my resume based on who is actually going to see my resume. And in line with that, I think it's really important starting now or, as soon as possible, that individuals keep what's called like a running document or a running log of all of the experiences that they've ever done, so that when appropriate, they can pick and choose the experiences that they may want to highlight. As an example, I did an experience at Barnard where I worked in a laboratory at Columbia University. My work in the laboratory was not explicitly long-term. Since I was only there, I want to say for 2 or 3 months, I couldn't move forward with the lab due to some scheduling constraints, but ultimately I still did participate in that activity, even though it's not on my resume. So having that, proof of that information, or just having that information on hand in this running document, is really helpful. Similarly, I don't have anything from high school in my resume because my resume is already pretty robust, and I don't really have space, nor do I think it's quite necessary at this point to include stuff from high school. But again, there are accomplishments that do exist and that perhaps I may need to access at some point in time. So I think it's really important to have some sort of running log where you're not necessarily concerned about structure, presentation, or formatting, but just use that as an archive of sorts, to just have it on hand. So another important thing that I just want to mention, these are some things that seem self-explanatory, but I definitely have seen students not really pay careful attention to. So definitely, first impressions matter. I think that's a phrase that's overused, but first impressions do matter. And how can you leave a good first impression with your resume? Well, to begin with, you can make sure you have a professional file name. So that includes, making sure your file name has something like your last name, first name, and resume. I've seen sometimes students use, version 25 or version 27 of their resume. And again, that just doesn't look super professional. I've seen some students include emails in their resume that's not professional. Like one very specific example is a student used a email in their resume that was called like Puppies and Doggies 101. So again, just make sure you're carefully looking through your resume to have that level of professionalism and to demonstrate that level of professionalism in all aspects. It's also really important to send your resume as a PDF only. Oftentimes, word processors like Microsoft Word or Apple Pages, they may, mess up the formatting as you're sending things. They may be incompatible. So, for example, I use Pages to format my resume, but that's not necessarily going to be compatible with someone who has only Microsoft capabilities. So PDF is really the most seamless format that you can use to make sure your resume is accessible and in its best possible presentation when you send it to someone. Spelling and grammar, again, somewhat obvious, but when you have this document that you're looking at, errors of spelling and grammar are very obvious. So it's important to just make sure those are taken care of. And secondly, formatting and overall organization. Again, I'm going to go into specifics through showing my own resume, how little tips and tricks really do make a difference in the overall aesthetics and look of it. But it's just important to keep this in mind as well. The next thing is content. So indeed, your resume should indicate, as we mentioned earlier, who you are, where your interests lie, and what your accomplishments are. The best way to do that is making sure you're using strong verbiage to communicate effectively what you've done. Also, I think something that not many individuals take advantage of is using both qualitative and quantitative description. So for example, you can say I volunteered at X organization. So for example, I can say that I volunteered at a hospital. I can say that in my role I assisted patients. In my role I worked with nursing staff to restock medications. That's great. But how can I really take that to the next level? This is really where quantitative descriptions come in. So for example, rather than just saying, I volunteered at the hospital, attach numbers to it. How often did I volunteer? Volunteering once a year is very different than volunteering bi-weekly. That type of information is really helpful to get a sense of the commitment that you were involved in. I can say, I supported a team of 5 nurses in restocking the medications. Again, that's just giving a sense of the scale, a sense of the level of commitment, and the sense of also the skills that you developed. Working with 5 people at the same time as part of a team is very different than working one-on-one with someone. And each of those experiences give you different skills that you learn from. So I think it's really important to try to be as quantitative as possible in your description. Just another example, rather than saying I supported my student club by fundraising, again, attach a number to it. So I fundraise X amount of money to support this organization and provide a qualitative description, right? So what was the fundraiser for? What did it support? Things like that really can help get across the mission of the organizations or the teams or clubs that you work for. And they also, again, give a sense of who you are. If you are particularly passionate about mentorship, if you're particularly passionate about things like equity, that is likely going to be the mission of many of the organizations you work in. So by saying their mission, you are inadvertently saying what you are passionate about. This also goes along with building a theme. So it's important to just think about also the type of activities you want to do, the types of things you want to get involved in to build that theme, or again, just to convey who you are, where your interests lie, etc. Just a quick point, certain professions may have specific items that they may want to include on the resume. As an example, these can include publications or certain links to portfolios that may be relevant. So for myself, because I've done work in research and I do have research publications, that's something that I very explicitly included on my resume because it's relevant for my field and a significant accomplishment. And lastly, this kind of goes without saying, really you want to highlight meaningful, significant, authentic, consistent, and long-term experiences. Now you may think, why did I have 5 adjectives to say 1 point? And the reason is this is really not 1 point. I'm going to talk about why. I've had friends whose employers have verified their activities on their resume during the employment process. So in other words, the resumes that my friend sent, their potential employers followed up on those activities, followed up on, who was listed as their supervisors, etc., to verify that these experiences are actually authentic. So please be honest when you are talking about your resume. You never know whose hands is going in. You never know how much verification or follow-up is going to be done. So that's something that I'll always recommend. Secondly, why do I say consistent and long-term? Well, the reason for that is because it's very obvious when a student has done something 1 time and is kind of using that in their resume. It makes it difficult for the students themselves to really come up with strong adjectives or strong content for describing that activity, and it just seems like it takes away from the student's other experiences because it seems like the student is just using that to take up space. So that's why I really say meaningful and significant kind of go hand in hand. You want to do activities that obviously mean something to you and that you've contributed significantly to. Authentic, again, self-explanatory. You want to make sure that these activities and these experiences are authentic. Now there are ways to embellish your work and to really make sure you're putting your best foot forward, but there's a fine distinction between doing that and being dishonest. So authentic is with respect to that. Consistent and long-term, again, is going off of the idea that you really want to make sure that this is highlighting your best accomplishments. And it's highlighting significant experiences that are important. Last thing is ending. So for ending, you just want to include technical skills and language skills. I typically see students who have things like hobbies or may have sports. I typically refrain from including those just because I feel like at this stage, it's not necessary per se, or I often feel like it raises more questions. But I do think this is something more specific to the student's individual case. If they have sports listed as a hobby, but instead they've done 4 years of sports with their school as part of their athletic teams, that's not a hobby. That's actually something I would want to be highlighted in the main resume. Similarly, if they list sports as a hobby, but they play with their community's local basketball club, again, that's not necessarily a hobby. That's now a formal activity. So I think hobbies, personal interest, things like that are something that usually require a little bit more one-on-one discussion on whether it's appropriate or whether it's even necessary. So with that, that's really the end of this presentation, just to give an example of the main points I wanted to discuss. So I now will be just shifting over to showing my resume and again, just going through some specifics. But before I do that, I wanted to ask if there are any questions within the group. Please use the chat feature to let me know now. I'm just going to give it a minute for questions to come in. Okay, so I will be sharing my resume now since I don't see any questions in the chat. Okay. Sorry. So I just received a question about someone asking if a law club in their school would count as a technical skill or something that would be included in the resume. So I'm just gonna send this question to everyone in the meeting so that they follow along with what the actual question was. Questions are being sent privately to me, so please don't worry if you're nervous about asking a question that's associated with your name. So with respect to the first question, if a law club in their school would count as a technical skill or in a resume, I would say it definitely would count as something you want to include in the resume. Again, involvement in the law club is
Oh, hey,
sorry.
Mehrose, I just wanted to let you guys know if you have any questions, type them into the chat, please. This is your chance to type any questions you have into the chat box. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. So the question was, and I'm actually just going to stop sharing my screen so this is a little bit more personal. So the question was if a law club as part of an individual school would count as a technical skill or something in the resume. I would say that definitely is something that you should include in the actual resume itself. It's a commitment. It's an organization that is requiring you to commit a certain amount of your time. And you are learning things from that organization as well. Technical skills are more so, competency in Microsoft Office, competency in Microsoft Word, things like that. So we again can go over these specifics in my actual resume. Second, so if a student is captain of sports teams, it should be listed in the major portion of the resume. Yes, absolutely. Leadership positions should definitely be highlighted in the resume. We'll be going over how to highlight and differentiate between leadership experiences and also experiences where you may have been general members within the same club. Couple more questions that are coming in. Where would a coding club be put in? Again, if you are involved in this club through any capacity, whether that's a general member or a leadership role, that definitely should be something in the main resume. Again, main resume is for activities. It's for commitments. It's for active things that you are taking a part in. Someone asked if references should be included at the end of the resume. So I typically do not include references for a few reasons. The first is, well, definitely at the college stage, no one will ask you for references. Again, that is embedded within the letter of recommendation requirement. Secondly, in my experience, someone will ask you for a reference only when you are at what is called like the final stages of being considered. So for example, for a research job that I was applying for, they screened my initial application. I had an initial phone call with the senior scientist. I then had a meeting with the lab, principal investigator and members of the team. And it was only post that I believe I was asked for references. So you really would want to give your references when necessary. I also think that you may be sending your resume to 10, 20 companies at one time, or 10, 20 schools. It's nice to give your recommenders or references, sorry, a heads up that they may be contacted by so and so, or it may even be, it's courtesy to ask them for permission to even give their information in the first place. So you definitely would want to just make sure that's okay with them before doing that. So this is why I personally do not include references at the end of the resume. Again, just to summarize, reason one being you may be sending your resume to multiple people, and it's courtesy to give your references a heads up of the possibility of them being contacted. Reason two is I feel like it's really only relevant at later stages of the game. Someone asked if opening a program for the summer, if that would be part of their resume. So based on the information provided, definitely seems like yes. If you're opening a program, I would just need more information in terms of the type of the program, what it does, but it seems like it's a substantial accomplishment from what I know. Someone asked if a class in business would count as part of their resume. So again, this does really vary based on the type of student and the type of opportunity they're seeking. For colleges, I would say I typically refrain from including courses on the actual resume. The reason for that is your colleges are already receiving a full copy of your transcript with grades. It's somewhat redundant and a waste of space to highlight that. I would say that again, this is something that's a little bit more personalized. If you are taking a lot of advanced placement courses, or if you're in a special program like the baccalaureate programs, that may be something we want to mention on the resume. But I would say including coursework is a decision that's made with careful consideration. I typically do not include coursework. Someone asked, what else can be put on your resume if you haven't necessarily have an awarding type of life? I think it's a little bit difficult question for me to answer based on the information I have about everyone here. Many students are unaware of activities that should and could be put on the resume. Many students put activities that are not necessarily appropriate or the strongest. So unfortunately, I don't have an answer to that as of yet, but I would say if you feel like there's stuff lacking to include on your resume, then there's always an opportunity, or there's always time to start involving yourself in activities or start involving yourself in commitments that not only you enjoy, but can speak on your resume. Someone asked, what do you mean by resume, the application or the essay, or is it something different? I don't necessarily understand the question. The resume is a document highlighting your overall accomplishments, experiences, and professional pursuits. It's not in an essay format. All right, lots of questions that we're getting now. Okay. Someone asked a pathway that they took for 3 years. Should that be put in their resume, like a business program? So again, I think this is a question that I would need more information on, or a one-on-one discussion. If this pathway is embedded through your institution, it may not be necessary to include. So for example, I went to Townsend Harris High School that has a partnership with Queens College as part of their as part of the backbone of the high school itself. That is not something that I would necessarily highlight on the resume, because that is part of my standard experience as a Townsend Harris student. Now, if this was something I was going out of my way for, and if this was something that I carved out for myself, that may be a very different discussion. That may be something I want to include on the resume. Okay. Someone asked if their resumes go to big jobs and companies. So again, if you send them to if you send your resume to these big jobs and companies, yes, the idea is that they would review it. Okay, many questions. I'll keep going. Okay, a student asked if being in dance shows and helping out in the art show is part of their resume. Yes, definitely. Again, any activity, especially activities within an institution, I'm assuming these dance shows and art shows were part of your school, that should be something included in the resume. I do believe I mentioned awards, recognitions, honor roll. There is a section on the resume to highlight that. I will also be going over that in my personal resume. Okay. So what is the someone asked, what is the difference between resume and the normal application and the essay? So I believe that there's some confusion. So for the normal common application, there are certain things that you absolutely need. There are things that are optional. This really depends on the schools you're applying to and what their requirements are. So it's a little bit difficult for me to answer that question. I would just recommend making sure that you are aware of the common application and its requirements, along with being aware of the school-specific guidelines. Someone asked, how should I start your resume and how many clubs you can put on the resume? I'm going to address that in the actual presentation of my resume. Someone asked how far back should their high school resume go, or if middle school experiences can be included. I think that's a question that really depends. If your resume is already chock full of high school activities, I don't really necessarily see a need to include a middle school experience. However, if there is a middle school experience that is significantly still part of your high school experience, I would say to include it. Okay, so more questions. Someone asked if they took language tests on their resume and that they have a biliteracy seal, where should this language learning go? So to begin with, languages are a section in the resume, so you should include, what languages you have fluency in. Secondly, if you have this biliteracy seal, that can essentially serve as an award. So that would be something you can include in the award section. Someone asked which colleges look for a resume and if it boosts your chances of getting in. So I don't have a specific list of what colleges look for a resume, but I would definitely say that it is an excellent opportunity to provide information about you in a way that is not restricted to things like character count and word count. So for example, on the common application, you only have a finite amount of space to talk about your activities. Now, the resume, because it's something you created on your own, is a better way to really show the full picture of all the activities and things that you did. Okay, someone asked if they did sports for a year, does it count as a hobby? So again, I think that I need a little bit more information to answer that question. If they did sports through their school, it's not a hobby, it's actually an activity that should be included on the resume. Someone asked how they can familiarize themselves with activities outside of school. How can we find internships and volunteer opportunities? So I really would say that it comes down to the individual. Speaking with mentors, speaking with upper class students, speaking with individuals like guidance counselors, using things like Google to the best of their ability. All of the experiences that I found really on my own. And just like putting your best foot forward and just trying your best to involve yourselves in whatever's out there. Certain schools do have established programs to help students work with outside organizations. As an example, when I was a student at Townsend Harris, they had a partnership with the hospital, with the local hospital there. And that allowed me to work with Townsend Harris and with the hospital institution to be a volunteer. So that's just an example of oftentimes school-based initiatives that work with outside organizations. Otherwise, I would just say that I've personally just asked upper class students what they've been involved in, or I've found experiences on my own just through searching the internet. Okay, so I'm going to now share my screen to go over my actual resume, and I'm hoping that this is going to answer a few of the other questions that had come up. Okay, so to begin with, we have the header, which consists of your name. It gives a brief description of where you're located. So I would not recommend including the full address. So I just have New York, zip code. Again, a professional email address that you actively check and will be checking for further correspondence, and phone number for again contact. So education. So I have my college education and my medical school education. Again, for a high school student, this would be replaced by their high school. I have the respective degree that I'm receiving. So for medical school, I'm obviously going to be receiving a doctorate in medicine. From my undergrad, I received a bachelor's degree of arts in biochemistry. Again, for high school students, this would probably look something like Regents diploma, advanced Regents diploma, things like that. This is the expected date of graduation. So I graduated Barnard in May 2021, and I'm expected to graduate medical school in May 2027. Someone had asked about academic awards and honors. So this is kind of how I place them. I just have a list organized with these academic awards and honors. Some of them are pretty self-explanatory. The others, I did give a brief description. So for example, Dean's List is pretty self-explanatory. Marie Reamer Scholarship, that was a scholarship through Barnard. Again, not everyone knows who Marie Reamer is or what she stands for or what the scholarship is for. So I did briefly state this scholarship was for an outstanding junior in chemistry. The Barnard Bear Pin. So Barnard provides students with these honors of a bear pin. Again, not everyone may know what that means. So I explained this is for student leadership and campus commitment. And then I just listed other awards. This is field specific, or this is specific to me. It may be relevant to some students who have been who have certain portfolios or who have publications that they may want to share. But these are my research publications. Okay, now going to the point of building a theme or again, just organizing your resume. To begin with, all of my activities are organized in what we call reverse chronological order. That means the most recent experiences are at the top, followed by later experiences. That's really important. And this is maintained throughout the entirety of the resume. So for example, here, I have, again, in this section, I have most recent experiences at the top, latest experiences at the bottom, etc. Now, again, in terms of content, so this is the organization that I worked for, their location, and my position. Each activity has a few bullet points. You definitely don't want to have activities with just one bullet point. I recommend at least two. Spacing is really key. So if you look at the resume, spacing is really going to change how the resume is overall perceived. So my goal was to obviously have a resume that looked robust, but also did not look dense. So if I changed the spacing on every section, you can see suddenly things start to look a little bit crowded, things start to look a little harder to read. If I change the spacing for every section. So these are, again, minor things, but these will help the resume just look overall symmetric and aesthetically pleasing. Each major section is separated by a 8-point font. Here you'll also see 8-point font. Here you'll also see 8-point font. So each major section is separated by that. Within individual experiences, I'm separating by 4-point font, 4-point font, and that trend continues throughout. That is, again, to maximize readability while making my resume, as inclusive of all the activities I've participated in. For my resume specifically, I have the margin set to 0.75 inches. For a high school resume, I would recommend starting with 1-inch margins. Again, this is unless you've had the ability to partake in a lot of activities, I might change the margins there. It really just depends on the balance between readability and, again, showing your activities. So if you're just over a page on the resume, I would definitely encourage to play around with these document margins and try to get everything to a page. Now, if you have a resume that's 3 pages, do not condense it to 1 page because that's just not feasible. That's going to lose content, and that's just going to make the resume clustered. So let's see, what other questions do I have? Okay, thematics, and again, the resume as a representation of who you are. So my resume, again, I'm in science. I'm now in the field of medicine or healthcare. Obviously, science is my top priority. So this is why publications, research experiences, clinical experiences, tutoring and teaching in science disciplines are really what's taking up the top page. The second page is including additional employment, leadership and community engagement. And then the last page has my technical skills. So my resume is 3 pages, but there is no expectation that a high school student has a resume that's 3 pages. I would say for high school students, I would definitely say 1 page is recommended or standard. Very rarely have I worked with a high school student and have their resume for over a page. Okay. So I'm just going to take a quick pause to assess for questions. I have received 2 or 3, so I just want to give individuals a minute to I just want to give everyone a minute to put any other questions in the chat because there were many that I addressed and there were some that I didn't get to get. So please take this moment to just go through a few questions. Then we'll just kind of be talking about the final details and wrapping up very shortly. We're already 40 minutes in. Okay, so someone had asked how many pages the resume should be. Again, I'm just using my resume to provide everyone here with as direct of a example as possible, but for a high school student, the resume is expected to be around a page. So please do not think that your resume needs to be as long as mine. Someone asked the application I'm using for the resume, and this application is Pages. Someone asked if it's recommended to have your resume 1 page long. So I already mentioned, yes, the resume should be around a page long for high school students typically. Someone asked how to get these resumes to colleges we apply to. Is there a place to attach it on the Common App? So this may be individual to the school you're applying to. I have seen some schools ask for it in the individual school page. However, what I did is I used the additional information section in the Common application, which allowed me to attach a file, and that's how I sent my resume out. Someone asked the format that the resume needs to be in. I'm not exactly sure what that question means. This is the format that I'm showing you right now in terms of spacing, type, fonts, etc. Someone asked if I have a sample resume of a high school student to show an example. I have many resumes of high school students, but the only reason that I'm unable to show them is because these resumes are of students who I've worked with through Kweller Prep, and I just wouldn't feel comfortable sharing their resume to other students or other individuals on a call without their permission. But a high school student's resume looks exactly like mine, except it's going to be a page. So there's nothing different that a high school resume should have than what I'm showing you right now. It's just that the length might be different, the types of activities might be different. Scientific publications are pretty difficult to come across. There's no expectation for high school students to have that. So again, this section might be omitted and the resume would be a page. Aside from that, the education would obviously be relevant to high school and not college, but there really are no other major changes. Someone asked following up their resume with the cover letter. So that's more so when you are applying to jobs. Jobs will ask you for both a cover letter and a resume, but in the case of applying to colleges, no, it would just be a cover letter. Okay. Haven't received any other questions as of yet. So I'm just going to quickly go over ending the resume, which actually someone just mentioned. So thank you for that. So I've ended my resume with just technical skills and languages. Technical skills, again, include Microsoft Office, Apple Office, Google Suite, social media platforms. Nowadays, a lot of jobs are looking for that as they expand on social media. So it's a skill. This is Weebly is a website development software. I have experience with that too. Other students who may be involved in things like coding or computer science can include computer science languages like Python or Java. Technical skills, and then I just have languages. So these are the languages that I speak along with my level of fluency in them. So I think for me personally, I've always ended my resume in this way. This is how I end resumes for students. And yeah, this is my resume and something that I hope is going to help you all. There are, I believe, just a few more points that I want to mention. One point is hyperlinking. So again, now the resume is online. What I've done is certain organizations that do have a web presence, I've hyperlinked them. I just think this is a good way, you know, if someone is interested in learning more about the organization itself, it's a good way for me to provide them with the opportunity to do so. And again, it's not taking anything away from my resume formatting, since all I've done is hyperlink it. When I send it to them electronically, they'll be able to look at it. I think another thing that I wanted to mention that many students are unable to understand or at the beginning is how to demonstrate multiple roles within the same activity. So I've seen a lot of students, you know, they'll write their president of the knitting club. And I'll ask them, okay, you were president, but at any time were you a general member or you know, another leadership member, or did you just straight go to president? And then they'll tell me, oh, actually, I was a general member and then I was secretary and then I became president. So my question is, why are you not including that on the resume? You should include all of these activities because they demonstrate the varied roles you've had, and they also demonstrate your level of leadership as you stayed committed to the organization. So here is an example of a organization that I was part of at Columbia University for approximately 4 years. In this organization, I had multiple roles that ranged from a general board member to president, with president being the obviously, most advanced or most leadership role. It would be completely unfair to me, and it would actually be, unreflective of the work that I've done if I just included president on my resume. So in order to combat this, what can you do? You can organize your activity in this way. So here I have the name of the organization. I have the location. This date now demonstrates the full time span that I've been involved in the organization from start to finish. So I started in the organization in September 2017 as a board member. I stopped working in the organization in May 2021 in my highest position of senior advisor. So this date is encompassing or is capturing that entire time frame. Now, again, because there are varied roles and each role had a different level of involvement, commitment, accomplishments, I had different sections highlighting each and every one of those roles, their requirements or their commitments, and their dates. So for example, board member, September 2017 through December 2017. So in this case, I really just had one bullet point. Again, I mentioned earlier, I would recommend activities to have more than 2 bullet points at least, or at least 2. In this case, the reason that doesn't really apply is because I have so much other leadership that I really want to focus on. So for board member, I just summarized it by saying, I actively participated in events and I assisted with event planning and execution. Secretary, again, different role, different time frame that's highlighted here. As secretary, this was my role to manage correspondence, outreach, and event scheduling. Now, with conference chairwoman and president being more heavy leadership roles, these are the roles that I really have those details. And these are the roles that can really highlight things that I mentioned, such as quality and quantity. So for this section, I didn't just say I fundraised. I said I fundraised a certain amount of money, and the reason for fundraising that was to support the organization. Here, I didn't just say I hosted events. I said I hosted around 8 to 10 annual events, and I even said the number of attendees. Again, this is just giving you a description of the scale of the work you're doing. It's very different to put on one event a year with 10 students versus again, 8 to 10 events a year with 200 plus attendees. So that's the idea. And in my last, position as a senior advisor, again, I just included the relevant details for that. So through this activity, I hope to make clear how an individual can organize their resume to highlight multiple roles while still making sure their leadership is clear, while still making sure nothing is confusing in terms of dates or length of involvement or time of involvement. And again, the formatting still looks easy to read and aesthetically pleasing. So with 10 minutes left, I want to make sure that there's time to answer questions. So any other questions? So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just give everyone another opportunity to feel free to put questions in the chat. Thank you so much for your time and attention, and I hope this was helpful. I'm just going to give it another minute. I do know that's late on a Thursday evening. If you don't have any other questions, feel free to leave the meeting at this time. But if you do have questions, feel free to put it in the chat and I'll address them now. And also I wanted to say thank you to everyone who's just stated kind words in the chat and congratulated me on medical school. So I want to thank you all for being so kind. Apologies that I haven't been able to get to everyone individually. There's a lot of people in the chat, and I just want to make sure I'm paying attention to just the flow of the meeting as well. All right, so it doesn't seem like anyone else has any other questions. Just to close off, again, just wanted to thank Francis for this opportunity. Wanted to mention, the availability of Kweller Prep services. For the ability of Kweller Prep services to again host these webinars, and also for the ability for Kweller Prep to allow me to work individually with students. It's definitely something that I enjoy. I tutor multiple subjects. I work with students on their common applications and on their resumes. So I really am glad that I was able to host this meeting. And if you do have any other questions on working with Kweller, more specifically on resumes, please feel free to reach out to her. Someone asked why I didn't include my high school in the resume. I did mention this. My resume is already 3 pages with activities solely from college. So just because of that, it's not really super relevant for me to include high school. It just would take up more space. That's the primary reason that I haven't included anything from high school on my resume. But I do have kind of my personal document that where I have logged things that I did in high school specifically, again, just as a personal log if I ever need to refer to that. So again, that's why I stressed earlier, you may not include everything on your resume, but it's nice to have an archive of all of that data, of all those activities. And in fact, I think starting that archive preemptively is even more helpful. So now that I started medical school, something that I've been doing is I've been having a document. Anytime I get involved in any activity or anytime I get involved in any sort of organization, I immediately go on that document and just write, name of the organization, my role, and date. Because obviously the things that you did are going to be quite memorable and easy to write about. However, things that are not so easy to write about, everyone forgets the dates of their activities. Everyone's like, I'm not sure when I started, when I ended. To avoid that, it's better to think proactively and have that running document updated as soon as possible. Someone asked if their high school resume should include or begin with a bio. So I recommend no. The reason for that is your resume is your bio. That resume should already indicate to the reader, again, what your interests are, what your accomplishments are. So there's no need for a bio. The bio should be extracted automatically from the resume. That's my personal opinion. But again, may vary profession to profession. But I think, again, for a high school student, I would say no. I have not been making resumes of high school students that include bios, because my take is the resume is your bio, and you should work on the content of your resume and its presentation to make clear, again, who you are, what your accomplishments are, and where you stand or where you want to move in the future.
And Mayors, I just want to remind all of you, if you have any questions, can you please let me go off so I'll go in the video. Hi, everyone. If you have any questions, you know that you can type it into the chat. And I also want to, are you almost done, Mehrose, or no?
Yeah, so I'm done. We actually had a lot of questions.
So funny.
So I just want to
Okay,
make sure
so
I've
we'll
got
go a little
everyone.
bit extra. We'll go a little bit longer. Everyone, how's the webinar? Is this good? Are you learning? This is our 9th webinar. So, and next week, Mehrose is leading the 10th webinar. So you can actually open the chat. It's fine. We're good, right, with the group? So let's open the chat settings. Everyone can type in the chat any questions that you have, okay? Good. Mehrose, thank you so much. So you're going to answer questions now, right?
Yeah, I already got to everything. I meant there were a lot of questions earlier on, so we
Okay.
pretty much right on schedule.
Everyone, I just need a favor because we're in the 9th webinar. So, and as you know, we do this as a partnership with your high school. So if you could please, I'm putting a link in the chat for Kweller Prep, for the Google reviews. If you could please take a moment and just leave a nice review for the webinars, because we definitely want to continue these partnerships and these relationships. And we want to be able to keep running this. You know, this is something we enjoy as well. So I put that in the chat. Let's also, everyone, let's type a nice thank you for Mehrose and for your effort. Next week, she's going to be running the resume one. So I'm also going to type thank you.
Next week
Okay.
is the college supplement one.
Next week is the college essay supplements. Okay. Good. Everyone say thank you. Thank you so much. And I put the link, if you could just copy and paste. Everyone, if you could just do it now, literally just leave like a quick review of how we're doing. And let me see what else. I also want to do something very cute. I want to take everyone off mute and congratulate Mehrose for all her hard work. So I'm going to count. I'm going to take you off mute, and then I'm going to count to 3, and then we're going to say thank you, Mehrose, 10 times. Ready? So I'm going to ask everyone to unmute. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
10 times. Ready? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
You.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Thank you, everyone. And please take a moment to save the link and to leave a good review, because we are actually, next week is our 10th one. So we're very happy to share that we're going to keep going. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everyone, for all your hard work and all your effort and for your participation. Please, I just put that into the chat again so that you have it. All right.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great
Thank
rest
you,
of your night.
everyone. Bye, Mehrose. All right, we'll see you next week for the grand finale of the 10 webinars. All right, all my love. Bye. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Ooh.